If I was one of your siblings growing up, how would they describe your personality?
Probably they would say funny, because I not like telling jokes all the time, but I like to make people laugh. But they probably say bookish, studious, probably a little more serious for my age, because from a very young age, I've been reading since I was 4 years old, and I've always read above my age range. In fact, they used to do standardized reading tests in public schools, and in sixth grade, I basically tested off the chart, 12.9, because that's as high as it went.
Mm.
I love to read, something still to this day. And I wasn't like antisocial, but I wasn't really comfortable with, well, no, how do I say this? I hung out a lot on the block with the kids, running around playing the games. I was usually like, I guess what you'd call now a dungeon master, in that I was the one that made up the games and the world that we were playing in, whatever our little games were. But like a lot of times when you'd go to parties with kids your age, I wasn't really comfortable there socially, because I was always thinking. I didn't want to engage in idle chit chat. What cartoon did you watch last Saturday, and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
I was much more comfortable hanging around with adults and having conversations with them.
Did you find yourself being intellectually stimulated by adult talk?
Oh yes, that's why I wanted to I wanted to expand my mind. I loved the concept of learning. The thing I've always loved about reading, and this is an anecdote. I have a song that the melody of it came to me in my head. And I had this practice. My mother was a very fastidious reader, and she subscribed to book clubs, Reader's Digest book clubs. And we had this 2-volume set, the Viking Book of Poetry of the English-speaking world, which was poetry going back to like the Beowulf years, when English was more Germanic than what English now. A third of the page was footnotes. This means that, and this means that, because you can't read this stuff. And I would read a few pages a day before I went to bed. And I got to like the 1600s. And there was this poem that was written by a guy, George Wither. It's called The Author's Resolution, or The Lover's Resolution. And it's one of those poems that the meter recites itself. You can't not read it in the meter. Shall I, wasting in despair, die because a woman's fair? Or make pale my cheeks with care, because another's rosy are? Be she fairer than the day, or the flowery meads in May? If she thinks not well of me, what care I how fair she be? And I'm 12 years old, and I'm a nerdy guy, and the girls aren't feeling my flow and unrequited love and all that. So that really spoke to me. And I read that, and I closed the book, and the next night I turned the page, and there's 4 more verses. I was like, oh, snap. And then the next day I thought, wait a minute. Thought of that melody in my head. Shall I, wasting in despair, die because a woman's fair? And the melody in my head fit perfectly to the meter, not just the rhythm, but to the first 4 verses were, the first 4 lines were the verse, and then the last 2 lines was kind of like the refrain. And it was like I just collaborated with somebody that died 300 years before I was born. And that's possible because he could write down the words he heard in his head, and I could read them. I never heard his voice. I don't know what he looked like or where he lived or how he grew up. But we wrote a song together. And that's the mystery of writing and written communication to me. And the fact that we're talking right now, I'm disturbing the air with my larynx and my mouth. But my thoughts are being transmitted into your brain, and you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing to me.
2 questions from that anecdote. Did you find yourself referring back to dead authors and their literature time and time again as you progressed through your music career?
No, not really.
How influential was your passion for reading on your music?
That's interesting. I would say my passion for reading is influential in every aspect of my life. This is my business. I've been in business for myself since 2010. I'm an IT professional. Mostly what I do right now is I develop web platforms for solopreneurs and small business owners and operators. I'm a self-taught IT person. My credentialed education ends with my Stuyvesant High School Regents Diploma. And everything that I've done professionally, I've taught myself through the ability to buy very expensive books that were very heavy and read them and consume the knowledge and apply it. So reading informs everything. Starting my IT career in '93, when most people hadn't even heard of the internet, the ability to have email and chat rooms before we had chat bots and graphic interfaces. It was just, you'd open up a screen like a command line in Windows, and you would go into a room and you would type and communicate with people all over the world. And that was fascinating to me, because back then still you were paying for phone by the minute, so I wasn't calling somebody in Uruguay or Europe or Australia, but I could chat with them. And in fact, I ended up, kind of interesting, and this was before dating apps, through just a text-based chat room, I sort of semi-successfully hooked up with a young lady from Uruguay.
Uruguay.
I don't know anybody in Uruguay. I've never been to Uruguay. I kind of know where it is on a map of South America, but if you gave me the outlines without the names, I couldn't point out which one was Uruguay. And she flew to the States twice because of just words. There was no voice, there was no picture exchange, nothing. Just text.
And how old were you then?
I was in my mid-30s, probably.
When did your love for music start?
Oh, 7 years old. I remember, and of course, because the family always would talk about this, I'm 7 years old and I'm standing in front of a speaker that's probably as tall as I was at the time, listening to Little Anthony and the Imperials singing Going Out of My Head. Now I'm 7 years old. I don't know anything about unrequited love or romance or anything like that, but I could feel the passion in the way that he was singing and the arrangement, and from that moment I wanted to do something that made people feel, not necessarily that particular set of emotions, but that touched people as deeply as that, when I realized that music could stir your passions. I played the viola in junior high school. In high school, I've played the bass guitar since I was 17 and a half. I met a kid from the suburbs of New Jersey at a summer camp where we were both counselors. And through sheer dogged determination, gosh, why not, dude? Talked me into becoming a bass player, something I'd never considered, but his enthusiasm was like, dude, just shut up. I'll do it. Stop bugging me. And I'm a bass player to this day. And in my 20s, I moved to Jersey and tried to chase my rock and roll dreams. They eluded me. And then a cousin of mine called me out of the bite that year. And he says, look, your stepfather's dead. I know your sister's older than you, but you're the oldest of the three boys in the family. And you got to step up. You got to come here. There's an opening for a Unix system administrator job here at Lehman Brothers, where I'm working doing hardware. And I was like, I don't know what that is. Unix system, you don't mean EUNA? He's like, no, that's an operating system. I was like, okay. I told you that I haven't worked in 2 years. I'm on public assistance. I'm riding a bike 26 miles a day, 4 days a week to go to the local community college. I have no work experience. They're not going to hire me. Are you crazy? Crazy like a fox, because 5 interviews and 3 months later, I started working at Lehman Brothers in February 1993.
It was your cousin Stanley.
Yeah.
What do you think he saw in you that he went out of his way to find your number to tell you about the job?
Well, he went to my mother and asked her permission. I always thought that she gave him the phone number of the one guy she knew that I knew in Jersey, but years later talking with her, she says, no, all he did was ask me if he could do it. So, I don't know how he found me. And he called me at my girlfriend's house that I'd been seeing for about 3.5 years, so he did not know her. I show up at her house one day, says, yeah, your cousin left the message. I'm like, how do you know that name? No. I think what he saw, first of all, was the potential. Because with no fear of boasting, I am an extremely intelligent person, always have been, very precocious. But he also knew that I was my mother's son and the product of my mother's upbringing and my stepfather's rearing, who was his relative by marriage, which is how he was my cousin. And and even though his parents were still alive, he was and had been for years, exemplary and supporting the family. He was very successful in technology from the hardware perspective. And he saw that this role had to be done. I mean, this was my stepfather's side of the family, the Caribbean side. My stepfather was from Grenada and also a lot of Jamaican relatives. And there's just a strong familial ties and the concept of supporting the family, And he's like, dude, John is dead. And he was holding it down. And it has to be held down. And that has to be you. full stop.
What was that like, stepping out of your music career and going into something that's more conforming?
Whoa, whoa, interesting question. It was a lot of things. I was amazed that it even happened. I was astounded at the opportunity. You know, the way they work in corporate world, they hire you at first through a temp agency. So, you know, if they decide they don't want you, they just tell the temp agency to stop sending you. They don't have to take you out of their payroll and all that kind of stuff. And when they do hire you, you get a pay increase. The rate they were paying me before they hired me full stop was 3 times what I'd ever made in my life. But I also felt I was abandoning my dream. And so there was a conflict. There was like, are you stupid? This is an amazing opportunity. And there's nowhere to go but up. And the ladder goes up out of visibility in the potential here.
Why were you being so reluctant?
Well, I wasn't reluctant. I mean, I took the job and I did it. Yeah, I just within myself, because I really felt so passionately about my ability as a musician and what I wanted to accomplish, to touch the world, to be a communicator. I felt for almost 10 years that that was my destiny. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. And it's like, so what do you do if the thing you thought you were here to do? Because I've been writing songs since I was in middle school and junior high school. And I'd always had that passion, that dream, not to be a superstar or a millionaire thing, but to perform in front of people. And like I said, to touch them the way that song touched me at 7 years old. And I felt that was my destiny, that was what I was here to do. And all of a sudden it was like, no, Cornell, your destiny is something else. It's like, what? I have a colleague that works with people, empty nesters, you know, raise the family, the kids are gone, who works with people, empty nesters, you know, raise the family, the kids are gone, who used to, like me, be performers, whether actors, dancers, writers, poets, whatever. And she holds what she calls play shops rather than workshops to sort of get them back in touch. It's like, am I someone who used to be a musician, who used to be a dancer, or am I a dancer who had to put that on hold while I had my adult life? And I was there more as a colleague of hers and to be an extra body in the play shop, but this one exercise was to come up with the outline for some sort of piece that you do, whether you did it or not, just to come up with the idea, to brainstorm it. And I came up with the idea of a spoken word piece about the milestones in my life, and the title would be, None of This Was My Idea Anyway. Because it wasn't my idea to become a bass player, and that's why I moved to New Jersey for almost 10 years. It wasn't my idea to get into IT, much less this aspect of IT at all, and this is what I've been doing for half of my life, for 32 of my 64 years. You know, and what I'm doing specifically now as an independent entrepreneur doing web design, that wasn't my idea. I was doing, when I started working for myself, I was doing system support, setting up servers and workstations and networks and user accounts, software installation and things like that. But then everything moved into the cloud, that market shriveled up, and one colleague of mine that I met through business networking asked me to take a look at her WordPress website. And you know, I've been working with technology longer than there's been a publicly accessible World Wide Web. Yeah. The internet's existed since the 50s, but the web, invented by Tim Berners-Lee at CERN, it was invented a couple of years before '93, but it was released to the world in May of 1993. Mm-hmm. My IT career started in February of 1993. So I like to say my IT career is older than the web. And I've worked with the fundamental technologies of the web since they were, like I say, science projects. You used to have to download the source code for a web server and compile it, and the database, MySQL, and the scripting language, PHP. So I'm having dinner with some friends of mine from high school days, and I'm crying in my beer, and it's like, the phone's not ringing anymore. I'm running out of work. The bank account's trickling like the sands through the hourglass, and people keep asking me to do this web stuff. So a friend sitting across from me says, well, yeah, dude, you've been working with the web since it's existed. What's the problem? He's like, well, I'm not really like a web designer. And he says, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You're complaining that you don't have work. Let me get this straight. You're complaining that you don't have work. And you're saying that there's people who will pay you to do something that you can do. And you're saying no. And I literally looked across the table and said, So I should say yes. And the reason that I laugh every time I tell this anecdote and point out that he was sitting across the table from me, because this was the kind of friend that known me long enough that had he been sitting next to me, he literally would have slapped me in the back of the head. Literally. Like, of course, what, are you stupid? And so someone had to tell me, do the thing people will pay you to do. You know, and that's some of the things I've learned, and I now do workshops with, for aspiring entrepreneurs, what I call accidental entrepreneurs. People who, like me, didn't want to start a business, they had to. And one of the things I say is, business is not what you want to do. Business is what people will pay you to do. Because you can be good at lots of things, but if nobody pays you to do it, you can be the best at it in the world. It doesn't matter. That's not a business. That's an aspiration. You know? And some people say, yeah, well, I don't want to. Well, do you want to be broke? You know? As long as you ain't breaking the law or hurting nobody, do the thing that people will pay you to do. Because we all have dreams and ideas. I would still love to be a musician. I'm not going to try to do that anymore. You know, like I say, I need a wire brush to scrape the rust off my knuckles these days. It's been so long since I played, and I used to play and practice every day without exception. And it's been months since I picked up my bass. A couple of days ago, I picked up my guitar and plugged it in, and you know, just played a song, an original song, for a while, playing around with the effects and whatever. I just recently bought a new electric guitar. I'd had one, and you know, through various things, lost that one. Have had an acoustic guitar for years and years. But the fire in my belly also isn't there. I mean, when I was in my 20s, I had to do that. I had to be on stage at least once a week. I had to perform. I had to jam out with my musical peers.
It was your muse.
Yeah. And now I am here to provide the corporate level skills that I developed working for Lehman Brothers for almost 4 years, working for Payne Weber for almost 4 years during the Y2K conversion, working for an architectural design firm that had Steven Spielberg, Jerry Seinfeld, Yale University, W Hotel Cheney, United Nations as private clients. I used to joke, my employers are millionaires whose clients are billionaires. I won't get laid off unless the entire economy crashes. And in 2008, the subprime mortgage meltdown happened, and the entire economy crashed.
How was that like? What was the atmosphere like? Like, you literally, you said you was working for Lehman Brothers at that time.
No. I was working for, Lehman Brothers from 93 to about 96.
Okay.
This was 2008, going into 2009. I'm working for an architectural design firm called Gwathmey Siegel and Associates. You know, I was subcontracting through a peer of mine from my Lehman Brothers days who had a startup until September 11, 2001, and after that they had to downsize because we were in Lower Manhattan, and that just got devastated. So now I'm working, started subcontracting for them under him. This was like his little side project from his day job with his 3 other partners. But the infrastructure he built for them was just a shambles. And I was like, dude, I apprenticed under you in the beginning of my career. Why is this such a pathetic? I said, write a proposal. These guys have the money. You know, the Spielberg, the UN are their clients, bro. They ain't broke. So I was like, you know what? I'll write the proposal. Let's upgrade this. They will pay for it. You know, they looked at the proposal and they said, okay, wait a minute. Dave's been here for 8 years and this is what we got. You just showed up and now we got this. Okay, we see Dave's name on it, but yeah, whatever. And then we go to meet with them, and they brought in some other subcontractors to shore up the proposal because he wanted to make some bespoke Linux server. It's like, no, you do not support billion-dollar customers with some system you invented. You get, you know, commercial-grade Windows servers. Yeah, I'm a Linux guy too, but you get stuff that you know is solid and stable. So they upgraded the proposal. I ended up project managing the upgrade. It was the Christmas of 2006 into 2007. A couple of months later, they called me into the office with one of the partners, which had never happened before. You know, they had 65 people that working there, 12 senior architects, and then a group of junior architects then, and each one of them was like a little boutique, and they had projects. So I had no reason to talk to any of the partners. And so the senior architect, who was also kind of like their CTO, says, oh yeah, Robert wants to talk with you. I'm like, what did Dave do? You know, because he was kind of messing around with the contract, and sorry Dave if you see this, but just reporting history. He was just coming in because this was pin money to him, and sort of throwing out the invoice and ghosting him. And they're like, "Where's Dave?" And actually, I had to have dinner with him one night,
Mm.
the fall before the upgrade took place, and I took him out to dinner to sit across the table from him. I says, "Dave, look, I got to explain something to you. This is just a side project to you. You've got a business. If this falls apart, this is just a little bit of extra money you lost. This is how I'm paying my rent. So I ask you here tonight to look you in the face and tell you, either get your act together or give me the contract, because if you mess this up for me, I will hurt you. And I want you to understand, I'm not smiling. I will physically do you bodily harm, bro, because I'm not going to be out on the street because you don't want to get your shit together." And the contract, the upgrade happened. And then in February, they brought me in the office and basically said, "Look, we know that Dave is your friend, but would you be offended if we hired you out from under the contract as an employee at the rate of what the contract is?" And I had to bite my lip to not jump out of my chair and shout, "I'm going to Disney World." I was like, "Well, actually, yes, thank you. That's a very generous proposal. Give me a couple of days to talk to Dave about this." And yes, So, and I had worked my way up to a 6-figure income as a self-taught IT person. So how did I feel when the subprime mortgage meltdown caused their business to implode, and a year later they had to lay me off? Very resentful. I mean, even to this day, I resent the people who already have most of the money, who for some reason seem to want all of the money. Because the subprime mortgage meltdown was just sheer stupidity. It was bad faith business from the get-go. It was writing a bunch of bad mortgages, bundling them together. I mean, they had an acronym, if you've ever seen the movie The Big Short.
Yeah.
Ninja mortgages. No income, no job, or assets. You wouldn't rent a room in your basement to somebody like that. You're going to sign a mortgage like that? And this was a class of mortgage that was so prevalent, they had an existing acronym for it. So when 60% of the mortgages that you're bundling and selling to Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch and Lehman Brothers are garbage ninja mortgages, of course the market's going to implode. And I did everything. I am the Horatio Alger story. I was a broke-ass musician on welfare who then was hired to start an IT career, and I'd worked my way up to a 6-figure salary, supporting a prestigious, Charles Guathmy is one of the New York 5 architects, disciples, if you will, of Frank Lloyd Wright.
You would consider that?
No, he was considered that.
He was considered
yes,
that?
there's, if you look it up, they're the New York 5 architects. They also call them the white or the gray. They had a particular style. It was him. There's also another Charles Geary. If you've ever seen these curvilinear metal facade buildings throughout the city, that the surface of them is not straight, it's like curved.
Mm.
Those are Geary buildings. Geary was another one of the New York 5 architects. So he was quite a famous guy. At his memorial service, when he died, a year before the subprime mortgage meltdown, and his memorial service was held at the Museum of Modern Art.
Mm-hmm.
Just goes to show you who this guy was, who has a memorial service at one of the most prominent museums in Manhattan. Among the people who spoke at his memorial were Steven Spielberg, Ralph Lauren, the designer,
mm-hmm.
and Brian Edwards of NBC News, I think that's his name, amongst several other people. So I was their IT manager. I supported their entire technology infrastructure, from the firewall to the desktop servers, printers, plotters, user accounts, software installation, hardware builds, upgrades of the software and hardware of all the workstations. Completely redesigned their system from something that broke down several times a week, and my job was to call a vendor and say, okay, what do we do to fix this, to I left them with an infrastructure so stable that when they laid me off, they never hired anyone to replace me because they didn't have to, because the system ran on its momentum. Plus, the last thing they had me do was to fully document it using Microsoft SharePoint. So these are the systems, this is how they work, this is what they do, these are the 4 servers, this is what the server does, these are the critical processes that are running, and if you click this link, boom, a remote access window is going to open up and you are logged into that server to be able to manage it. And I didn't do anything wrong. In fact, I did everything right. I should be on the cover of a magazine. And these yutzes who are supposed to be the ones who are so intelligent, trust us, we're running the world's finances because we have all the fancy degrees and all this experience. And they crashed the global economy out of stupidity and greed. And who suffered for it? They got bailed out because they were too big to fail. I lost the best job of my career because of their stupidity. My employers didn't do anything wrong. Their clients didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong, but we paid the price for it. And as you can tell, I'm still feeling some kind of way about it. But had that not happened, and again, none of this was my idea anyway, I would not be in business for myself if that hadn't happened. I'd still be working for Gluckman, Siegel and Associates.
But that had to happen.
I don't know that anything has to happen. I don't believe in fate like that. That is what happened. And then I had to make a decision. Why did I go into business for myself? Because I figured, okay, let me shop my resume around. I might have to take a pay cut. I won't be making over 100 grand, but maybe 85, 70, 85, something like that. So go online, whatever have you, submit the resume. First job offer comes in. They want me to be IT manager. Okay, network administrator. Say what? Database administrator. And help desk operator for 85 grand a year. I was like, whoa. That's 4 full-time job titles.
4 hats.
For 80% of what I made for the one? You must be crazy. Get out of here with that. But the next 3 job offers that came in were exactly the same. And I was like, hold up, wait, that's where the market is? It's like, no, if I accept, even though people, I mean, especially back then, 2009, 2010, people would have said, dude, if you can make 85 grand a year, you can. He's like, no, but you're doing a $250,000 worth of work for that 85 grand. First of all, you're going to burn out. Second of all, you're grossly undercompensated. But most importantly, if I accepted that, then when the market recovered, I've priced myself at that rate to do that much work for that little pay. And I wasn't going to do that. And as I say, especially when I was doing my workshops, I says, look, if you're going to treat me like my name is Toby, I got to be the one holding the whip. And that's why I started my own business. And unfortunately, the worst thing that could have happened to me. I got my first private client before I got fully laid off. And for 2 years, I got steady referrals. The phone rang constantly. I got referrals from my referrals. I got second generation referrals. I had steady work for almost 2 years. Now, why do I say unfortunately? Because after 2 years, the phone stopped ringing. And I realized that I wasn't the one making the phone ring, and I didn't know how to make the phone ring. Because for the past 2 years, I hadn't been doing business, I had been doing work. And that's when I realized that business is not what you do. Business is what you sell. All business is sales.
And at that time, you didn't know what you were selling.
I didn't know that I was selling because I wasn't selling. I didn't have to. I was answering the phone for incoming requests and just saying yes. And I mistakenly thought that since it was 2 consistent years, that it was just going to keep, because just when it seemed like things were good, then I get another referral. So I was like, oh, they're just going to keep coming in. And I wasn't the source of the referrals. The referrals were usually coming in from someone I had done work for that would then pass the word on. And I just figured that they'd tell 2 friends and so on and so on. And eventually, also, I didn't see that the market of what I was doing, server support for private homes and small business owners, everything was going into the cloud. So people weren't having their own physical servers and hardware on premises. You know, you get a laptop and you dial into some system online, and online is taking care of all of that. So they don't need me, you know. Then I realized, oh, how do I even, like I said, what am I selling? I didn't even know how to articulate that. You know, what can you do? And I would usually start reciting my resume. Well, I started at Lehman Brothers. I don't care about that. What can you do for my business? And I couldn't answer it. And then shortly after that, when I got into building websites, which is not what I do now, I do web platform development. I'll get into that in a bit. My pitch initially was, well, I design websites for small business owners and operators, and I use WordPress, a content management system, which is open source, and you know that's 40% of the internet. Nobody cares about all that. That's technobabble. It took me a year and a half to realize, here's my pitch. Okay, you're a small business owner, and you realize that you can leverage online technologies to help you grow your business. Would you be interested in learning how to save time, make money, and get more customers? And if your answer is yes, then we have a conversation, because you're a potential customer of mine. If your answer is not yes, nice talking to you, thank you for your time. And notice, I didn't mention anything about technology. I didn't even mention websites. Are you interested in those three things? Do you want to save time, make more money, and get more customers? Then if you say yes, your next question is going to be, so how do we do that? And then we get into a conversation about what it is I do. Because the what of what I do is only how I accomplish those three things for you. My objective is not to build you a website. My objective is to build you a platform that will help you to save time by automating a lot of your business processes that you're doing manually, make more money by you understanding A, what you're selling, who you're selling it to, and how to sell it most effectively, and to get more customers by understanding that sales is a conversation and that the purpose of all of your web presence, your website, your social media, your outbound email campaigns, your conversations with people, and that the first link you send them to is about starting the conversation about value, that they're going to say, you've got what I want, how much? Because that's what business is. And all the rest of that is just chatter.
What you just mentioned to me, how were you able to articulate that to an audience? Like, I know you started out doing workshops, so how were you able to do that? How were you able to articulate, oh, you have to sell like this, you have to be like this, you have to show the value up front before anything?
Several things. First of all, I have paid thousands of dollars to be trained to be a professional speaker and to do what I call the Tony Robbins thing, which is how to get up there, to make your pitch, to have your hook, to understand who your audience is and how to craft your message. But in addition to that, it goes back to the years that I spent as a performer. Because I was a musician, I was also a spoken word poet, I did some stand-up comedy, I wrote a column for a local newspaper in Asbury Park for 5 years. And a few years before she died, I was having a conversation with my mother, and she said, your gift has always been communication. And it kind of surprised me, because I always thought that I was the smart one who was supposed to go be an engineer or a doctor and something like that. And I actually felt my years of my walkabout trying to be a musician was disappointing the family, disappointing their expectations. And to hear her say that, I was like, and she saw the puzzled look on my face. She says, no, you've always been smart enough to do whatever you set out to do. But your gift has always been communication. Even a lot of the jobs that I got in New Jersey, as I was a broke-ass musician and only worked because I had to, was because I was articulate and could communicate. People say, oh, this guy's got a brain. In fact, I was working at a Macy's in Eatontown, New Jersey. And this one morning, we're doing inventory. So this is before the store opens up. We've got to inventory all the stuff that's on the racks and the shelves. And I'm with the vice president of the whole Macy's. This is a 3-story Macy's, pretty big. And we're walking down the escalator, and he turns to me and says, associates or bachelors? I'm like, excuse me? He's like, degree. What kind of degree do you have? I'm like, I was like, oh, no. I just have a high school diploma. And he was kind of shocked, because he's like, of course you've got a degree. It's just a matter of what level of degree do you have, because you're you. I was practically his right-hand man at that point. So how do I communicate? Is realizing that, what am I trying to say to them? I'm trying to get them to understand what I had to understand when the phone stopped ringing. And how Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, he's got that, the cash flow quadrant, the cash flow quadrant. Right. Well, I have what I call the pyramid of business fundamentals. And my joke is that he's only got 4 aspects of his graphic, and 2 of them are negative, which is, employee and self-employed, the ES, and then the successful side is the BI, business owner and investor. Well, my pyramid of business fundamentals is a triangle, and there's 1 element on the top, 2 in the middle, and 3 on the bottom. And the top is what I call the 1 fundamental business precept, which is, as I discovered, all business is sales. And as I joke, and I say it this way when I do my workshops, I say, it's not just my opinion, it's math, and I can prove it to you in 3 simple steps. Step 1, no sales, no money. Step 2, no money, you're out of business, and well, actually that only took 2 steps. And that's why I put it that way, to get the laugh. Because like I say, to get the joke, you have to understand what I just said to you. And that's why I use humor. Then in the middle, there's the two fundamental business objectives. All businesses have many objectives, but every business has these two objectives, which is to get more money and to get more customers. Now you can do other things, but if you don't make money, again, see all businesses sales. And where does the money come from? It comes from the customers. Then the base of the pyramid are the three fundamental business questions that you have to ask and answer, which is, who is your target market? What is your unique value proposition? And what is your call to action? Or simply put, who are you talking to? What are you offering them? What comes next? And why what is your call to action is the third fundamental business question is because most entrepreneurs think that once you get somebody to nod yes and express interest, that you immediately try to close the deal. And in doing workshops, usually for 7 years I worked with an organization called Operation Hope, working with them, not for them. And I would lead, they had a 12-week entrepreneurial training program. And I ended up being the lead presenter. I would start their first session with my own content. And so there's about a dozen and a half people in there, and usually there's someone who's married. So I would ask, is anyone in the room married? And someone would raise their hand and say, let me ask you a question. How long was it from when you first met your spouse until you finally got the proposal, either you proposed or were proposed to? And usually it's some number of years. And I says, okay, let me ask you this. What would your reaction have been if the second date you ever had, you got a proposal of marriage? And usually there's laughter because it's like, that's absurd. That would have been crazy. That's too soon. It's like, exactly. That's the mistake we as entrepreneurs make in trying to rush to try to make the sale in the initial conversation we have with the prospect. It's too soon. Just because I've expressed interest doesn't mean that I'm a lead, much less a prospect. It means I'm kind of interested. Tell me more. And if you bum rush the show, trying to then, what I see is all you're interested in is trying to pick my pocket. You're not really interested in providing value to me. Because in this graphic, I also have what I call the 21st century sales conversation. And it's a sentence, it took me a year and a half to craft. The 21st century sales conversation is a conversation in which the prospective buyer concludes that the value being offered, getting all choked up, that the value being offered exceeds the price required to acquire it, at which point they choose to buy. Sales is not me convincing you to give me your money. Sales is me communicating that what you're looking for, I have at quality and at a price that to you is undervalued compared to what you're getting. In fact, I often say, I want my clients to feel like they're cheating me and that they better hurry up and close the deal before I change my mind and realize I need to increase my price. Now, I've worked out a way to deliver the value in a way that it's affordable for them and it's profitable for me. But in terms of what your typical web designer charges, I charge about a third of what they charge, and I deliver 2 to 3 times the tangible ability of what I build. That's why I say I don't build websites. I build web platforms. You want e-commerce? I can do that. You want a CRM? I can build that into the website. You don't need ActiveCampaign or Constant Contact or anything like that. You want outbound email campaigning, you want a learning management system like a Udemy or a Kajabi or Teachable. I can build that into your website that I build for you, and all you have to pay is the web hosting fee and keep your domain registered after you're done. Because I know how to use open source technology to deliver all of that to you as a stable platform where you're not paying, ClickFunnels over here and Constant Contact over there and Shopify over here. No. It's all in your platform because all those are websites that deliver you services. Well, then why don't I build you the website that provides the services and you own it? And that's what I do, which is why I make the distinction that I don't build websites. I can teach a kid in high school to build a decent website in a month and a half. That's not what I do. I build the whole platform, and I'm starting to say now, come for the platform, stay for the business coaching. Because most people, especially solo entrepreneurs and small businesses, they don't just need the platform built, and they don't need to understand how the platform works. They need to understand what I had to learn. What are you doing? Oh, I need a funnel. Yeah, what does that even mean? Do you understand who you're talking to and what you're offering them? Do you understand the progression from contact to lead to prospect to closed business. Because if you don't understand that, you can pay Russell Brunson for ClickFunnels, which is an excellent funneling system, but that's just the mechanism. Funnel is a verb, not a noun. Funnel is not ClickFunnels. Funnel is what you do with ClickFunnels. And if you don't understand that, you're just making Russell Brunson higher on the 2 Comma Club, but you're not doing anything for you. You know, because funneling was once done manually. A salesperson's got a Rolodex, and they make phone calls. Okay, that lead is out, and you scratch that off the list. Okay, now of these people, who are the hot leads? And then you categorize them. Oh, got to call this person back, and you make a little note. Okay, what do I have to talk about? That where are we on? You know, warm, hot, cold lead, closed won, closed loss. That's a process. That has nothing to do with the mechanism. You can do that with a spreadsheet. I don't advise it. It doesn't scale very well, but you can. You can do that written on a piece of paper. Once you understand what you're doing, then the technology just helps automate it, capture all of the data, and makes it easier for you to keep track of things. But depending on the technology, it's like people talking about AI. What about AI? What's it going to do? To me, AI is like an amplifier, and as a musician, I can relate to this. Jimi Hendrix's Star Spangled Banner.
Right.
Okay, he couldn't play that on an acoustic guitar because you need the effects. But if you gave me his rig that he used to play that, I can't play that because I can't play guitar like Jimi Hendrix. So I make a lot of noise, I get on people's nerves, but I would not play the Star Spangled Banner like he did. So there's a saying in technology, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. Technology, ChatGPT and Claude AI and Perplexity and all these things, they're just amplifiers for your creativity and input. And they can help you get output better than if you put 6 months of effort into it in a couple of hours, if you understand the input and the outcome that you want. But a lot of people are just like, oh, just write a book for me. Well, that's garbage, and that's going to look. And you read a lot of AI-generated books, you can tell they're AI-generated books. You watch YouTube, you can tell the stuff where the whole, the audio track was completely computer-generated. It's garbage. The pronunciation is kind of stilted, the words and misuse, and oh my God, don't talk to me about these AI-generated subtitles. Spelling the words wrong, totally mishearing what the person was even saying. It's garbage. And that's more and more and more proliferated because people think that AI is doing the work. AI doesn't do the work any more than a car drives you to where you're going. And don't even talk to me about self-driving cars. That's a whole other conversation. But give me, like I often describe what I do for people, I could give you a Lamborghini. First of all, why would you drive a Lamborghini in the city? But anyway, if you don't know how to drive, I've just endangered you and everybody else on the road because I've given you this powerful machine that you don't know how to use. If I gave you a car and a tank full of gas and I told you to drive to Massachusetts, but you don't have a map or GPS, how are you going to get there? Just drive west and hope that you went, actually, no, because you need to drive north because Massachusetts is up in New England. So you're heading out to Michigan. You don't even, well, it starts with an M, you know. Now, I use AI, and actually, I got to be honest, I was a late adopter.
Really?
Because the political me, and I'm used to be very much an activist, protested the original invasion of Iraq in the 90s under Bush 41. Also protested under his son. Then I realized that protesting doesn't do any good anymore. When I first saw the emergence of AI and ChatGPT and things of that nature, my first take was this is just going to put people out of work. Corporations are just going to use it as an excuse to automate and technologize things and let people go. Which, yeah, they are going to do. But then when I started using it, I realized the ability. In fact, just yesterday, as I said, I build platforms for clients. And some of my clients sell things, either memberships or products, you know, through a shopping cart. And they use either PayPal or Stripe to do the credit card clearing, so they don't have to pay a credit card clearing company, a processing company, a monthly fee. You pay by transaction. You pay 3% of whatever it is, and you don't pay unless they process something. So if you don't make any sales, you don't pay anything, which is why I don't believe in credit card processors for small businesses, because you got to pay them whether you make any money or not. And if you have a bad month, you're ending up going into the hole to pay them for charges you're not even processing. But you got to eat that 3% fee. So for a client of mine who's based in France, she's a tutor, for her membership site, I found a bit of code that basically automatically adds 3.5% processing charge to whatever you charge. So then after Stripe takes out their 3%, you actually end up with a little more than the total price that you're charging. And it does this automatically, and it inserts it in the proper place, and it puts in the text, please note there's a 3.5% processing, da 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 da. So I was thinking, okay, well that's good for the membership fee, but what about the shopping cart stuff, the e-commerce thing? Mm-hmm. So I took that code that was for a different module of WordPress, and I went to Claude AI and I said, hey, this code does adding a 3% thing. Could you write me the code for WooCommerce, which is the plugin that does the shopping cart stuff, that does the same thing? And does it, puts the notes in the proper places, and all I had to do is take that code, plug it into the existing website, and it does. Now, it's been a decade and a half since I wrote any PHP code. I would have to look up and read and the hooks and the thing and then the code, and I could have figured it out in about a month. Mm-hmm. And instead, in 5 minutes, I had the code running and working, and now I can plug that into every client site that has shopping cart facilities. And now they don't have to eat that 3% processing charge.
Seeing that, how do you think that would impact the future? Seeing that, like, in your mind, like, oh wow, this did what I could have done in a month.
Right. I'm a member of a organization called Black Executive Men, and they have a membership group, which obviously is for Black executive men, and they have a monthly town hall meeting, and they also have meetings on discussing AI, particularly from a Black perspective. And we had a meeting last week. The main concern I have for AI is, like all technologies, it is disruptive. All technology is disruptive. Word processors put typists out of business, secretaries and typing pools, who their job was to take handwritten stuff and type it up. Now, you don't need anyone to do that. You type it in, doesn't matter your spelling, whatever, spell check, automatic. People don't use it thoroughly enough, but that's a whole other conversation. When the automobile came into fashion, they didn't just put horse farmers out of business and horse and buggy manufacturers. There was a business of people who scooped up the manure and sold it as fertilizer. And that business is gone because there aren't horses all over every city in the country pooping all over the streets. Henry Ford did not say, I'm going to put those poop farmers out of business, but that's what happened. So AI is going to displace a lot of unskilled and semi-skilled labor because that's what's going to happen. I worked on a project a couple of years ago with a person, and at one point he needed to get a foreign coder because we got to the point where I was just out of my ability to hack WordPress code. I was away from it too far, and in order to get things done, we're going to have to modify. I mean, WordPress is a modular system with over 60,000 plugins, so usually most of what you need to do, you just find the appropriate plugin, just like you find the app for your phone for what you want it to do. Mm-hmm. But after a while, he wanted it customized and tweaked to a point that was out of my ability. And there's this gentleman, Vikrant Kumar, shout outs to Vikrant, excellent human being, great coder, nothing you could throw at him that he couldn't solve in a couple of 3 days. And also was grateful for the opportunity to apply his, actually imagine subcontracting something out to a coder in India, and he's thanking you for the ability to be able to use his brain, his mind, and his skills to do this. But now, and I was saying to myself, if I ever needed, to farm out, the coding, I would look him up. But now I don't have to do that. But I don't have the money like that, which is why I hadn't reached out to him in the first place. But now I don't have to reach out to him in the first place. And so there's a lot of people in the Philippines and Eastern Europe and India who their services aren't going to be needed anymore because you can just go to Claude AI or ChatGPT. And I have my own GPT engine because I'm a tech guy, so I can build one on my virtual private server. So there's a whole bunch of people who, like automation put a lot of factory workers out because now we've got robotics that can do 10 times the work of a person and more efficiently with less error, fewer accidents. They don't take breaks, they don't get tired, they don't complain, they don't need vacations. So you just need a handful of people to maintain those and a couple of people to run the computers that run the whole systems, and the whole factory is running faster, better, more efficiently, cheaper, and more cost effectively with fewer human beings. Now I'm working on my second book. My first book is entitled Do Business Better, Why Small Businesses Fail and How Not to. And that's where the introductory chapter is entitled 2 Years of Steady Referrals Almost Ruined My Business, which was that tale I told you about. The phone stopped ringing. My second book is entitled Born Again Capitalist, and the subtitle is Run a For-Profit Business Without Sacrificing Your Soul. One of my theses in the book is that at some point in my lifetime, it occurred around in the 80s, that we flipped what's supposed to be happening. Rather than capitalism being an economic system that serves humanity, the 1% of 1% people at the top seem to be of the mindset that humanity exists to serve their capitalistic ventures. And that's the percolation to the top rather than trickle down as percolate up. That's the grotesque disparity of wealth. And it's ever increasing. The middle class is almost disappearing. I mean, used to be if you made 100, 200 grand a year, you were upper middle class. That's barely middle class anymore, especially here in New York. If you're making 50 grand, you just a little bit above broke in New York. You can't really afford to live in this city if that's all you're making. You know, now there's a lot of other places in the country where that's good money, but not in New York.
I don't know.
I mean, no one's going to say no to that as opposed to making 25 grand a year, but yo, you really got to make 75, 80, 90 before you can say you're comfortable in New York. And then you ain't styling, you ain't rich, but you're okay. You know, with rents sometimes being what, 3 grand plus for a studio apartment? Not even but a studio apartment. And there's places in this country that's a mortgage. That's less than that's more than a mortgage. And you own a house. And that's just rent. And you paying somebody else's mortgage. You know, so everything is getting tilted because people shouldn't exist to serve the money. The money should exist because really what do we have to do? We have to live till we die. And pardon the profanity, people, but I break down life into 7 biological imperatives. Eat, drink, sleep, shit, piss, fuck, die. That's life. Everything else is ancillary to that. And you have to do, you gotta eat, you gotta drink, you gotta eliminate, you gotta sleep, you gotta defecate. If you don't do those, you're gonna die.
Why fuck though?
Because there's no people. See, that's the imperative. That's how other people get here.
I don't think this will be my final question, but with the advent of AI, how do you see entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, building businesses?
I see the ability to go from ideation to implementation sped up by so many orders of magnitude that if you have a month or so of training of how to understand, again, when you understand that business is about the value that you offer to your market, and if you answer those 3 fundamental business questions: who is your target market? What is your value added proposition? And what is your call to action? Who do you serve? What do you offer them? What do you want them to do? And then you're able to put that into properly configured prompts in an AI engine. You will get not only a business plan, but an implementation schedule faster than if you went to Wharton or Harvard Business School and got an MBA. And you'll be able to do, not just to think and understand, you'll be able to put that into practice in days and weeks instead of months and years.
So the feedback loop becomes tighter now.
Yeah, and you're gonna get past the conceptual, like I say, from concept to concrete. You're gonna be able to actually do. You're gonna have to skip all of that. We no longer need to go to school for 4 years just to get somebody's imprimatur and say whatever. It's like, no, if you can, because like my favorite definition of college is a place where B students teach A students how to go to work for C students. Yeah, because a lot of people famously dropped out of college, not because they were dumb. It's just like, no, I'm just gonna get the money. You're gonna waste more years of my time and take money out of my pocket? No, I'm gonna go out there and get the money. I got it, thank you. And now with AI, there are people who are clever enough to understand, oh, input, boom, there's a game plan, go and do. And, but that's always a fraction of the population. The real question is what happens to everybody else when there aren't those factory jobs, those warehouse jobs, those low-level, unqualified, as a colleague of mine was referring to a couple days ago, those tier 1 labor positions, because they're already shrinking and going away. What happens when they're not here anymore? What happens to the hundreds of thousands or millions of people what are they going to do? And when we have a society that serves the money and the corporate interests and not the people, then they are just what, the common rabble? Do we want America to end up like India, where there's literally carcasses on the streets and a class of people, the untouchables, who are just, everybody just walks past them bathing in the crap-filled Ganges and drinking out of the same place? See, these are the questions that we have to ask as a nation What is our responsibility? Are we beholden to corporations? Because to me, corporations ought to say thank you for living in this nation which gives them the ability to become billionaires. You know, free land, safe streets, armies and military to defend you against foreign invaders, laws to protect you against people stealing your intellectual and physical property. You owe the nation doesn't owe you, and you don't own the nation, or at least you shouldn't. But those are the questions that we as citizens have to ask ourselves, not just citizens of the United States, but citizens of the world and members of humanity. Those of us who can, who have capabilities, do we have an obligation to the rest? Or do we have to build strong fences and get guns to keep them out as they're going to roam the streets because they don't have anything? And those are the questions people aren't asking. Those are the things I think about. I already got AI because I'm a smart guy and I know how to work it and it's working for me. But I think, what about those people? Because it's going to either, we're going to solve the problem before we get there, or we're going to be confronted with the problem and then we're going to have to come up with a solution, and that's too late.
What are your top 5 thoughts right now?
Top 5. How long am I going to live? How do I be a better person? Where will I travel first? Will I find another lover? And what does the future hold?
What do you think the future holds?
Unlimited possibility. And things that we can't anticipate till we actually see it. Because if we could predict the future, we would have done it, and we've never been right. I think it's going to be mostly fascinating, challenging, troubling, but it's always been that. And if you look at the timeline of history just in this country, it's getting better. Compared to where it was in the 1600s, especially for us as black men, I don't want to go back there.
Hopefully not. Appreciate you coming on the show, Cornell.
Thanks so much for having me.
It was a pleasure, talking to you about everything, from your whole journey to AI to how the entrepreneurial scene, and hope to talk more.
No stress. Be back anytime, man. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No problem.